Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So the state of Texas in 2024. Again, this is a state Democrats have talked about for years. This was a state that they thought they could get by 2024 or 2028. They said it's turning purple. Donald Trump, he won it by 9 points back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, and that was down from Mitt Romney's margin of around 14, 15 points. And then in 2020, he only won the state by 5 to 6 percentage points. Democrats ahead of 2020, a lot of them were saying, yeah, Texas might go blue. Well, it didn't go blue, and you did see a lot of rightward shift among Hispanics, but you did see some leftward shift among some like college-educated suburban whites in DFW and Houston. And obviously, you have a lot of liberal Californians that have moved to Austin. You do have a lot of conservative Californians that have moved to, DFW and Houston, though, which has kind of offset it. But 2024, it appeared to turn a corner. You have the border crisis at play in Texas, and it's just a state that Democrats really couldn't contest because of the fact that it just seemed like Biden was not popular there. Obviously, they tried to contest the Senate race, but Donald Trump, I said he would go out and win it by 8. Now, he didn't win it by 8. He didn't even win it by 10. He won it by 14 points just about, and he did much better than I think a lot of people anticipated in the big metro areas and gained even more support among Hispanic voters in South Texas. He almost flipped like every single county in the Rio Grande Valley area. Seems like those two counties are probably primed to flip by 2028. They narrowly went for the Democrats, and it does seem as if there's a little tiny bit of work to do there to kind of have a more aesthetic map. But regardless, you did see the state of Texas turn a corner. Different coalitions for sure behind Trump's 14-point win and Romney's 14, 15-point win, but still overall, the state is basically back to where they started, and this is a red state, and a red state deserves actual America First leadership that represents said red state. If they voted for Donald Trump by 14 points, you deserve a senator that is going to be very solid and is going to vote in line with Donald Trump's original agenda and not be some total pushover, backstabber who votes for gun control of all places in the state of Texas. And that's kind of what brings us to 2026 in the state of Texas. It's one of the first primaries. It's going to be happening in probably like 10 months from now. In 2022, their primary was March 1st. It's usually in early March. And when it comes down to Texas, you do have a Senate race that will be taking place in 2026 between the Republicans and the Democrats. John Cornyn is the incumbent in the state of Texas, and that is true. But still, he is going to face some opposition in the primary. And you have one of the best attorneys general, technically is the correct plural for it, in the entire country, in Ken Paxton, who has just accurately eviscerated Cornyn over the years for not exactly being where he needs to be, supporting DACA, supporting amnesty, basically, supporting mass aid to Ukraine, supporting all these neoconservative foreign policy measures, and even gun control in the state of Texas. As a Democrat, you can't even win if you're supporting gun control, let alone a Republican. And Paxton is somebody who's been an enemy of the Republican swamp in Austin. They've tried to impeach him because he called out the then Speaker of the House, Dirty Dade Phelan, for being a drunk moron on the House floor. And now he's running against John Cornyn. This is a guy who is wildly popular in the state of Texas. They said for a long time Paxton might go down. Paxton's going to have a competitive race. Threw a bunch of money at him in the primary back in 2022 for AG. Didn't work out. And then come the general election, the Democrats, they tried to put up an effort. Look at this. Even the New York Times, the day of the election, said potentially serious challenge. He won by 1 point less than Greg Abbott won by in the state of Texas. And he was a big-time abortion hardliner And this was right in the wake of the Dobbs v. Jackson decision, but it didn't exactly matter. Ken Paxton went out there and he ended up winning. And in like the suburban areas even, he ran in line with Greg Abbott. The only reason why he did a little bit worse is because the, Democrat candidate had a big, I guess you would say, footing in the Hispanic community in South Texas, did a little bit better than Beta did in the gubernatorial race, as we know. But it's like, this is a guy who can win an election, will win the general election, maybe by less than Cornyn, because I think the Democrats would contest it, and it's true, like Cornyn is somebody that probably would get more crossover votes, but still Texas is not a state that's really in consideration for being competitive. Now, Donald Trump has come out and said he's not endorsing, which makes sense, because if he did endorse John Cornyn, then he'd get a lot of pushback from a lot of the grassroots, and he doesn't want that because his base does want Paxton by and large. But on top of it, you also have the fact that he can't really antagonize Cornyn because Cornyn's a powerful senator, and if he's going to want to get his agenda passed through, antagonizing Cornyn this early is probably not really the best move. Paxton probably is going to win the primary, one could say, if he keeps up his current trajectory without the Trump endorsement. Why antagonize Cornyn when it's not necessary? But still, you see a lot of polling for the primary, and the polling for the primary shows that, Cornyn is not doing that hot, and Paxton is winning in terms of the polls we've seen. But also, for the general election, the worst poll I think I've ever seen in my entire life, the worst Psyop ever just dropped. We talk about the Selzer poll and how it very well was spiked to benefit the Democrats, to give them confidence that they could beat Donald Trump in Iowa, of all places, which was just about as red as Texas ended up being at the end of the day. But you have one poll, and Colin Allred, who ran against Ted Cruz in 2024 and lost. He lost by nearly 10 points, despite the fact that Ted Cruz is not really all that popular, and that we know, but still Ted Cruz won by around the margin we expected Donald Trump to win by. He won by the margin John Cornyn won by in 2020 when Cornyn outran Donald Trump. But now you're looking at this and you're seeing, it does really seem as if Colin Allred is going to run and be the nominee, but then you look at this poll and it's like you'd think that Paxton would easily go out there and win. I'm not saying he's going to win by 10 points even. He might win by 5. It's still worth an upgrade in my opinion, but you look at this and it's like they put a poll out here, which was a Republican internal from Brad Parscale, who is Donald Trump's campaign manager in 2020, who arguably single-handedly doomed his campaign with his poor placement of finances. He was out by the summer. He was involved in some drug-induced domestic abuse scandal thing. I don't know if he really ever faced charges for it. That's not really my place, but there was some alleged criminal activity. He had a big crash out basically soon after he was released from the campaign, which he did a very poor job at. His firm released an internal, this guy who is a known saboteur. Whether he was an intentional saboteur or not is completely irrelevant because he did a horrible job with the Trump campaign, spent a ridiculous amount of money early on in Colorado, New Mexico, Oregon, just a complete and total disaster class that he was running. And it was, too late to really save. The messaging was weaker, etc. But you look at what's going on here. They released a poll showing Colin Allred not only just barely beating Ken Paxton, but beating him by 15 points. That is a 30-point turnaround. This is absolutely ridiculous. There's not a single person on earth who genuinely believes this. Even if you somehow believe that it'd be a close race, this is the worst psyop I think I've ever seen in my entire life. They basically want people to believe that in the state of Texas, which in a midterm electorate might even be more Republican-friendly just based on the typical turnout dynamics that we see, that Ken Paxton is going to do 30 points worse on net than Donald Trump. It's absolutely absurd. They're basically saying that, Donald Trump in the state, he's able to go out there and get a total of 56% in the state, but Ken Paxton can only get 37%. So they're basically saying that 34% of Donald Trump voters are going to vote against Ken Paxton. It's absolutely absurd. It's ridiculous. I don't even think we need to entertain this poll as something that is serious because of how absurd it is. Ken Paxton is somebody that has faced a lot of scrutiny and has survived time and time again. He has his own donor base in the state of Texas as well. It's not like he's going to be completely frozen out of funding. And it's an early primary, so he has enough time to kind of unite the party. And everybody knows the guy's scandals. They're all out in the open. They say corruption. It's more like a Huey Long style corruption. You know, he'll bend the rules to get things done, basically. And they don't like that about him, even though they've investigated him time and time again, and they found him innocent, and the House impeached him because they're petty and because they just happen not to like him because he calls them out on their RINO BS. Well, now they're releasing the polls that are honestly not believable. You know, if you had a poll that showed Paxton like in a dead heat with Colin Allred and then Cornyn up by 15, then maybe you would have a case. But when you put a poll out like this, you should be ashamed of yourself, because not only, you know, are you trying to subvert the public, but you're also so incompetent that you're just getting laughed at. And it's like the Selzer poll. That's the moment I knew for sure Donald Trump was going to win the 2024 election. And a lot of people, even, you know, on the right, were coming at me for like brushing it off because they just don't get it for some reason. But in reality, it's like, yeah, you know, if you put out a poll that was like Trump +4 in Iowa, and that's the final poll, I might actually be concerned, because that's a viable, I mean, I wouldn't think it's a viable result. I still think he'd win by more than that, but it's like, okay, maybe there's something wrong here. But then when you put out a poll that is Donald Trump losing to Kamala Harris in Iowa, it's just absolutely absurd. And this poll, I think, is honestly worse. I think it would age worse than the Selzer poll. So they should be ashamed of themselves for putting out this garbage in the state of Texas. I don't know what exactly they're trying to do here besides just try to convince people that Ken Paxton's going to get his ass kicked. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. Is it going to be more competitive than with John Cornyn? Yes, it will. Is he going to be able to lose? Most likely not. And, you know, they're just basically trying to sabotage his campaign. They're trying to pressure Donald Trump to say, you know what, we can't elect Paxton. You know, you should get him out of the race, maybe keep him as attorney general or whatever. And they'll probably try to primary him again for that post too, because that's how these people operate. But they just don't get it. And they just don't want solid leadership that can win. So they put out these fake polls, and they want to protect this guy who's a total RINO, a total clown in John Cornyn, a McConnell acolyte, so they can basically continue business as usual in politics. They don't want somebody who would be the best senator, the most conservative, authentic, you know, MAGA, America First style of senator. They're looking for, you know, keeping the RINO establishment and their stranglehold on the party. And that's not exactly doing too well. It's really not. These people are weak. These people bend over for things like gun control, and they cave. These are not people you really want running the Republican Party. Amnesty as well. If Democrats got their way on amnesty, all these millions of people that have poured into the country over the past few years, they wouldn't be deported. They would be staying. They'd be given citizenship, and they would be voting, and they would mostly be voting Democrat, and that would not be helpful. So when you look at it, it's just downright absurd what these Republicans are trying to do. But don't fall for the psyop. It doesn't make sense when you look at the data. Paxton is somebody who is solid America First and more than capable of victory, and a hell of a lot better than John Cornyn. Like I said, I think he would win by less, but still it would be worth it, and he would still win by, you know, upper single digits most likely. I mean, especially the fact that Democrats are running again, another loser in Colin Allred if he does decide to run. And if he's up against Beta, I think he'd win by double digits. I think that goes without saying. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.